Welcome to another episode of the Wenner Folsom podcast. We have an epic guest for you today, one of my close friends and one of the smartest women I know, Sarah Norvilas. Today, we're really going to talk about some subjects around adrenal fatigue, burnout, what happens with your cortisol, your nervous system. Like us, warrior culture tends to grind really hard. So if you're not aware of this could be leaning towards the danger zone. So super important to pay attention to. And we also get into a ketamine assisted therapy and what the benefits are and how that could really make a difference for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. So wanted to catch this episode.
And Dr. Norvilas, this is one of the most grounded, integrated, heavy-hitting healer women that I have ever talked to. So this human is bringing the real deal. So tune in on this one. Hello to the Wenner Folsom podcast, your source for battle-tested leadership and resiliency. And we have a great episode and a great guest for y'all today. Don't we, Josh?
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's guest. We have Sarah with us, and Sarah's not only a close friend and ally, but she's really helped me put myself back together again. I think it was 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago, 2 years ago? I had consistently found myself in adrenal burnout. So any of you high achievers, which is probably most of you listening, any of you that deal in high stress, when we're constantly giving energy out to the world and don't take time to fill up our tanks, which we would frame as resiliency, and you're not doing a good job at resiliency, you're going to end up with adrenal fatigue first, and then it's going to move towards burnout. And there was a moment where I was in deep burnout. I was barely functioning. Really basic tasks get really difficult. Like literally things you could just fly through start to get really challenging, and you're highly irritated when your cortisol's blown, your receptors are blown, and you're basically barely functioning. And Sarah was like, I remember you asked me this one question, Sarah. You said, how much energy are you putting out to the world and how much energy do you just take to fill your buckets to receive? And it was a dead zero on my scoreboard.
100 to 0. Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, Sarah's been the main tool or ally, a mentor that I've used to really help put me back together again. So this is going to be a great episode for everybody today. She's not only one of the smartest, most intelligent individuals I know, but she's also super heart-spaced, does a lot of work, is relentless at her own personal development and personal work. So it's going to be an epic episode. So I just want to welcome you to the show, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. That was an incredible introduction. As Josh said, my name is Sarah. I have been a practitioner of Eastern and functional medicine for over a decade. And I tend to kind of treat people who are type A, strong entrepreneurs, as Josh said, warrior culture, people who tend to give a lot to the world, have really high expectations of themselves, and don't really understand quite what happens to our body when we're doing this, 15-hour workday, all energy out and not enough energy in. And so I think that that's where we're going to kind of start today.
Yeah, it's a really relevant topic. And, maybe just so people have a frame on your background, like how did you get into helping this sweet spot? Because I know you do a lot of things, but this tends to be what high achievers come to you in burnout to get themselves turned around. Did that just happen? Or was it also because you're a high achiever?
You treat what you know. I think that's how a lot of things kind of get set up. And I worked the same way. It's a beautiful space to be in. I think you end up being surrounded by the healers and the doers and these really potent people who want to contribute to the world. But I worked, from the time I can remember, I worked and I went to school and I volunteered and in the moment, it feels really incredible because you really feel like you're serving a purpose. You really feel like you're giving to the world. And I remember I was probably in my late 20s when I hit my first burnout. And it happened like that. I felt fine. And then suddenly I was sleeping 8 or 9 hours a day and I was exhausted and I had no idea what was going on. And it kind of went from there. It kind of ended where I really started to ask for help, where I suddenly didn't feel like I had access to my emotions. Things felt really, really flat. And if you know me, I am incredibly empathic and driven through the world by my emotions. To wake up not feeling connected to my life was really scary. And I was really fortunate. I had a functional doctor at the time who kind of looked at me and she said, "You're in burnout." And I said, "What do you mean? I can do everything. This is really great." And so that's how I really started to learn about what adrenal fatigue was and what burnout was. And I really studied it and have kind of gone through a couple iterations of it myself in business. I think you know what you know, but there's such an important place of constantly checking yourself, constantly regulating, constantly bringing yourself back and pulling your boundaries back in because if you have these patterns your whole life of how you work and how you show up and how you do, sometimes our body creeps back into those directions. So it's not only knowing how to keep yourself healthy, it's constantly checking and regrounding to make sure you don't end up back in that place.
Yeah, and just for anybody listening, if you're wondering, hey, am I in burnout now? Let's talk about symptoms for a moment, because I think that's important. I know for me, the way I know I'm in adrenal fatigue is, first, I don't catch it because I'm typically hypervigilant, and I actually get more productive, more focused when I'm running too hard on the red line of energy out. And so what I start to notice is Philip will check me because I start overriding conversations. There's no space. I keep talking. And so he'll be like, take a breath. Or he'll check me in our leadership calls or different things that we're doing. So that's one indicator. The second indicator for me is, so there's no space. That's what I'd say. I kind of override space. Second indicator is because I'm during the day really tired and exhausted, and you have a big to-do list, I notice I start to crave sugar or carb cravings, which means I'm in cortisol depletion. My body's trying to get me back up to that hypervigilant state. And so I notice with the caffeine or something I may take to try to get the job done, I get a little tiny boost and then I'm shot. I'm even more tired. So the
That's
caffeine,
making it worse.
So the things that normally work to give you energy and get you into that state stop working. And then the third thing for me as an indicator is at night, I'm wired. So all day you're kind of lethargic and tired. And then at night, when you're like, I finally can sleep, you're like eyes wide open. You're still tired, but you can't sleep. So that's my indicators. Are there other things that show up either for you, Philip, or you, Sarah, when you start to head towards that?
Yeah. Well, Philip, have you been in adrenal fatigue ever? Have you hit that space?
Hey, I probably have. I'm like most of our listeners, I'm a warrior class person, which means, I have been in the military and I'm built to serve, and I have my identity around honorable service. And so I will sacrifice anything to make sure that I achieve that peace. And so obviously, there is a just rampant use of caffeine, nicotine, stimulants in order for warrior culture to operate at that level in a prolonged state. I mean, it's actually acknowledged as being honorable to run at that state. So I'm certainly one of those people that does that.
And I grew up in military culture. So my father was a Marine, my uncles were Marines, all of their friends were Marines. So I had it modeled without even being modeled to me that you are doing so often, and there's not a lot of self-reflection, especially when I was younger. And so maybe I'll give you guys a little bit of an idea, if for anyone that's watching that doesn't understand what your adrenals even are or what they do and how you get fatigued. And so
and real quick, I think this is really important because when I first started happening, I would go to a regular doctor and he's like, your adrenals are fine. And 100%. So there's a very big difference between your actual adrenals in the body and the adrenals we're talking about is more like your cortisol. Like maybe you can help distinguish that, because I went to an energy doctor, which sounded woo-woo at the time. He's the one that's like, oh no, this is adrenal fatigue, and gave me the initial supplements to repair them. But regular doctors were like, you're fine. And I was like, so maybe just describe the difference
100%.
between those two.
And not to take anything away from regular doctors. I mean, there's the difference between Western medicine, which absolutely has its place, and functional medicine, which digs a little bit deeper. And so your cortisol, which you had mentioned, when Western medicine looks at it, they're just looking at a snapshot of where it is at that moment. And so your cortisol is supposed to do this throughout the day. So if they're only looking at the snapshot, it could be fine in that moment because you had coffee or you just had a stressful conversation. But if you do a test throughout the day, which is what we do, you're going to see that sometimes you have no cortisol in your system or your adrenals aren't functioning at all. And so your adrenals are basically these little organs that sit on top of your kidneys. And historically, they're just meant for fight or flight. They're the organ that pump out adrenaline and cortisol. And the thing about adrenals is they don't know the difference. We haven't evolved to a place where our body goes, the adrenaline is in our system because we're sitting on the freeway in rush hour, or we just had an argument with our spouse, versus there's a tiger in the corner. So if that adrenaline is in the system, the body is kind of putting you into a fight or flight state. And so hard exercise, 15-hour work days, unregulated nervous systems, all are causing the body to pump out these low levels of adrenaline and cortisol all day long. Unlike the rest of our organs, our adrenals are not meant to work every day. And so what happens after 10, 20 years of these behaviors is you start to degrade the way that they work. And the tricky part with that is that our adrenals are the precursor to our immune system, to our digestive system, to our hormones. There's a lot of pieces that they're really tied into. And so I think I'd mentioned what people will typically see is they've run these schedules for so long and they feel great because your body has a lot of reserves in your 20s and your 30s. You have all of this energy and all of this chi and all of this vitality that you can pull from. You're not doing 15-hour days because you're superhuman. You're doing it because your body is giving some reserves to keep you alert and to keep you functioning. And so in your 30s and 40s, which is typically when I start to see it happen, you start to run out of reserves. And so it's these low grade, when basic functions start to shift to me, that's when we know there's a problem. When your sleep starts to shift, when your digestive system starts to shift, when you suddenly need caffeine and stimulants to stay awake, when your cognition, when you feel a little less clear and a little less focused, when your maybe moods start to shift, where you feel like you have less bandwidth for the people in your life, those are often those precursors that something is a little offline and needs to be supported.
And I know for me, the reason it was a wake-up call is for all you that love to serve, if you do reach burnout, you literally can't do basic functions. So like little things like brushing your teeth, picking the clothes up off the floor, like really basic functions, you literally don't have energy for. That starts to become highly irritable, like you're really triggered and activated because you just have zero bandwidth. So you can't serve. So the mission breaks. And for a warrior, that's death.
Yeah. I remember trying to make a cup of tea once and I dropped the tea bag and cried. I was like, what is happening? This is a very simple task. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. This is just not normal nervous system function. And so you can get it back. I think the important thing to know, because often people hold the mindset of, well, if we hit burnout, we'll just fix it, is the body tends to have a really smart somatic memory to that. And for me, you might not ever be able to push your body the way that you used to without having a rebound. And so I find that when people hit burnout, the body doesn't ever give you the resiliency that it had before that. You have to reel it in a little bit as kind of a safety mechanism, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so big picture here, Philip and I talk a lot about habits, patterns, rituals. We talk a lot about resiliency. And I know you're a big advocate for those same functions. This is what needs to change. If you want to, I remember, Philip, we were having a conversation about running sprints versus running the marathon. And that's been a lot of what we've been shifting internally. We've been shifting in our companies. We've been shifting in ourselves, is can't run sprints and actually run the marathon. So we have to start to reevaluate our lives, where vitality has been our main driver we use is, hey, we want to grow and get better. We want to serve. But if we don't focus on vitality equally and actually start to build vitality, we can't grow and serve and we break. And so that's been our lever or driver for that. And so, a lot of things we talk about resiliency based are you getting into nature? Or maybe moving to that conversation, Sarah.
Yeah.
What does it look like to actively rebuild, and what new habits, patterns, rituals do people need to build that may be very different than how they've been operating, that in order to live the marathon, they're going to have to rearrange their life this way?
Yeah. And for me, especially when people are coming in and this is the first time they're really understanding this, you can't reinvent the wheel. So we tend to add rather than subtract at the beginning. I often sit my patients down and I say, you have to draw little boundaries. And it certainly doesn't mean that you go from a 15-hour workday to an 8-hour workday, but it's, do you have time pocketed for yourself at the beginning and the end of the day that are just yours, that are not cell phone based, that are just soothing? And I find with a lot of the warrior culture and a lot of kind of the type A doers, when I ask them, what do you do for fun? What do you do for yourself? Often I don't get an answer because it's so far out of the basis of self-care that, they used to love going on hikes, or they used to love drawing or art or music or whatever used to really fulfill them has gotten lost in the bigger mission. And so to me, you first have to identify what really fills your cup outside of your family, outside of your job, because we have to be bigger than that. Our bodies are way too intelligent to kind of think that those two pieces make whole people. They just don't. So at first, it's just the recognition of what have we lost in the last 15 years. And then it's starting to put some boundaries in place. sleep is a non-negotiable with adrenal burnout. If you're sleeping 4 to 5 hours a day and think that you're okay, yeah. If you're sleeping, you feel like you're okay, it's because your body is contributing adrenaline to the system that makes you think that you're okay. You cannot fix adrenal burnout unless you're at a minimum 7 hours of sleep. There's supplements that people have to take as well to just slowly repair that organ system. Diet is a big piece of it in terms of getting more greens into the diet, making sure that you're hydrated. These very easy, basic things that go when people get really busy. We skip meals. You cannot skip meals when you're in adrenal fatigue because the body doesn't know the difference between I'm on an intermittent fast and my body is starving. So actually, let me speak to that for a minute, because I know a lot of the warrior culture, everyone's into fasting right now. Like the idea of an intermittent fast is a really big thing. And I love an intermittent fast for a lot of people, but not if your adrenals are burnt out. You have to think of your adrenals are these very gentle, newborn children, if you will, that need the utmost care and support. And so we're looking to create consistency in the body again. We're looking to generate really strong basic nourishment. And so consistent meals, consistent sleep, consistent hydration, some boundaries between where you end and work begins is really important, and some personal time as well.
I wanted to kind of reframe what Sarah and Josh are talking about for the people listening, particularly the warrior class people, is that the message here is not to step down your service.
Yeah.
It's to maintain your service so that it's sustainable and consistent over time so you can win.
Yeah.
Because like Josh said, the burnout factor means that you are now abdicating your duty. If you fail to take care of yourself, you are abdicating your honor and your duty and your service. That should be a very significant thing for all of us, that instead of saying, no, you should work out less, no, you should actively recover. That's how it works. And Josh and I both work with a lot of fire departments, and the way they take care of their vehicles is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. You can fucking eat off a fire truck. Yeah. I mean, it is pristine. Mm-hmm. And yet they're guzzling Red Bulls, right? Oh. Because the way that they're looking at their gear and their maintenance and their capacity with their gear, I mean, it's flawless, but they're not doing the same thing, or we are not doing the same thing with all of our nervous system, our diets, our sleep, our souls. There's a larger conversation there. So it's consistency over intensity first, right? Yeah. And that's the only thing that gives us a foundation so that when it's time for intensity, we can have it, pull that card out. And that was a big one for me, is, all of this, sort of a resiliency work was framed as just a step down of performance. I rejected it. Yeah. I mean, I can't stand that story. And it wasn't until we started exploring you're actually more effective if you start taking care of yourself, you start looking at your lifestyle and your protocol. And I just want everybody listening to, if you're thinking that you have to step down and take a break, that's the short-term game that gives you the bigger long range. This is a long season with a lot of games in it.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect. The fire truck analogy is brilliant, because I think we just assume that our bodies are these machines that run regardless with no maintenance. And same thing, if you don't change the oil in your car falls apart. If you don't pay attention to just the basic care, it falls apart. I run 2 medical practices. I run just as hard as I ever have, but my intention around self-care is incredibly high right now, because I cannot show up the way that I need to without it. And Josh, you had said something really brilliant to me once. You said, when you get these basic practices in place, it almost feels like time slows down. And that to me has been one of the truest truths, in the sense that when my adrenals are burnt out and when I'm running at the speed that I run at, sometimes it feels like there's not enough time. I feel very busy, and sometimes it feels overwhelming. And when my practices are consistent, there is an ease by which the day happens, and I don't feel exhausted at the end of the day. And listen, no one hits this 100% all the time. I am not going to sit here and say that my practices are in line every single day and I'm knocking this out of the park. Like, I don't do them sometimes. And I feel it after a week or two when I don't do them. And now that it's a habit, my body calls me back in, and then we get back in alignment and we go from there.
Yeah, I really love this, because even what put me into recent adrenal fatigue, because I've been really good. I used to have it quarterly. That's how bad it was. Actually, I used to have it more often when Sarah and I started working. Then it became quarterly, which was a big win. Then it moved to like twice a year. And then it's been gone the last year. I just got caught what we would call going to war. I had a bunch of things that all hit within 6 weeks, and there just wasn't any time.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot, like, because I'm now running at a higher level. I think as we do the resiliency practices, time slows down. You're
Yeah.
like, at first it's like, oh, I want to add more to the plate because that's my old
Yeah.
operating system. And so I'm even learning, oh, okay, just because I get more efficient, more productive, doesn't mean I keep adding more to the plate. I also have to make sure that I'm anticipating this recovery. So it's almost like I'm learning, if I'm going to push hard, there's going to be a push back, and I have to build in that push hard or build resiliency when I'm pushing hard. So you could do it a number of ways. You could take active recovery as you're pushing, but I mean, if you're going to war, if you're deployed, or if you are on fire season, or there's a busy fire season and you're gone a lot, you may not have a choice to do some of the resiliency as much as you'd like. You got to anticipate when you come home and you reintegrate back, you're going to be slower for a while, and you're not going to be able to operate at that unless you fully recover. So I think it's just learning the either take less off the plate, not to your point, Philip, it's not serving less, it's just adding less additional things on, or prioritizing the recovery as just as important as mission. Or when you do run a mission that you don't have time for it, knowing it's just going to take time, that you have to actively prioritize that if you want to be back to full capacity.
And another like nuance to that is the thing, we think that what we're modeling is this selfless service of almost martyrdom. Like people look at me serving and doing these great deeds and potentially sacrificing ourselves. That's a terrible thing to model to our kids. And for all you who are in leadership positions, whether it be a fire station or a company, you want to model sustainability. You want to model long game. You want to model that greatness. And the short-term martyrdom, whether, and this is for parenting, I'm a parent, so I have to be very careful about, I'm modeling not just what I'm doing, but how I'm doing it. Very, very important. And so, hey, self-care is actually an important leadership component for what you are modeling for the rest of the world. It's a really, really vital thing.
Well, and these components extend way out past adrenals. I mean, to your point, I think it changes how we show up and how present we are. Taking these little bits of time, especially if you're a first responder or if you're someone who's in active duty, regulating your nervous system and learning how to really self-care and self-soothe allows you to be present more in the moments that you want to be present. Otherwise, I think when your body is giving these signals, to me, depression and anxiety specifically, which can be an offshoot of adrenal fatigue without question, to me is first line of the body saying, like, we're not okay here. Like, we really need some support. And that support is so much easier than we actually think it is. I know we call it the work, but the work at the end of the day is very simple. It's self-check-ins, it's self-regulation, it's a little bit of boundaries, it's understanding how your nervous system works. And 30 minutes a day, all the time I hear people say, I don't have 30 minutes. And then I ask them to open their phone and I'm like, an hour and 10 on social media, an hour and 15 on this. Like, it exists, we just aren't choosing it. And everything in life is just an act of what are you consciously choosing from moment to moment.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. When we start to push that hard, the body finds a way to regulate. And if the truck's been running on red lines, something's going to give. And that's typically where the addictions come from. It's where the anxiety, depression comes from. It's also where we get more distracted because we're in pain. The body has all this pressure in it, and it's looking for a valve to try to release some of it because we're not actively building that in. And so it finds a way. The body's resilient. So the body will find a way. It just may not be in the way that serves you or your values. And because you're in a survival state, there's no thought process. So a lot of our reactions, alcohol, nicotine, substance, food, all these
Coping.
things, we're like, all the coping mechanisms are other trauma. We call it trauma signs. So all the gauges in your truck going off, if you're hearing any of these things and they've been going off and you don't want to do them and you do them anyway, that's a really good indicator you might be heading in this direction. So getting ahead of it now is going to stop you from having a blowout or a engine seize or a runaway truck.
Yeah. Well, we've also been taught that I call it Bandaid culture. You know, you grow up and something's wrong and you take a pill and you kind of move on, or you grow up and something's wrong and in your 20s, you go drinking with your friends and you feel better. And I feel like we have this beautiful opportunity to really teach people a new set of skills that were never given to us. And so for anyone listening, I want you to understand that this isn't some like new age woo-woo kind of concept of how you move through the world. This is what we're finally understanding, and we have the ability to pass forward into generations. I've had more conversations, and I know it's kind of one of those modeled quotes of like, if we were taught to do this as children, life would look incredibly different. If we were taught to self-regulate, if we were taught boundaries, if we were taught self-care, we'd just be moving through the world completely differently and still as effective, still as triumphant, but we wouldn't have to kind of go in and actually repair these physical deficits that we put ourselves into.
We were taught this.
You were, say more.
A long time ago.
Okay.
You know, any indigenous culture.
Oh, well, a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. They were, I mean, when you study any of the indigenous cultures, the way that they reintegrate people after a trauma is very structured. It's collectively held. It's reinforced as societal norms of purification and emotional regulation, whether it be a bad childbirth or an accident or hunting or war. There is a collective set of norms about the emotional regulation and resiliency that's part of our birthright that we have lost for multiple generations. Especially
in modern Western culture. And it's funny, occasionally I'll have kind of a male warrior type come into the office and I start talking about this. And they always go back to, you know, my grandparents didn't need to do this and their grandparents didn't need to do this. And I said, well, if you want to take it back to kind of Paleolithic times, they were sleeping for 12 hours a night and they were in community constantly and they were up hunting and gathering and eating organic food. And they, you know, went up and down with the sun. And it's a very different way of living now. We have electronics that scatter our nervous systems. We have people sitting in front of computers for 8 hours a day and not seeing sunlight sometimes for several days. It's just a completely different set of tools that we need to manage modern day right now.
Hey, we thank you for listening to the Wenner Folsom podcast. Just a couple quick notes. First, if you are a man and you're looking for an honorable and inspiring group of men to hold you accountable and challenge you to grow in your relationships, your fitness, your career, your finances, and your life, go to www.k4men.com. And if you are a veteran, first responder, or man or woman who deals with trauma, and you are looking for some resiliency tools and skills for you, your team, or your organization, go to valorresiliency.com. Hope to see you there. Back to the podcast. Isn't it funny? Like, you go back to the basics. A lot of this is like sleep, sunlight,
eat
water,
well,
clean food, people, laughter, community. Like,
it's
the
so
basic
simple.
things is really what heals us, because that's what we need.
And we're living in artificial times. Everybody will agree to that. Even the number of hours that we work, you're talking about 15-hour days.
Yeah.
Indigenous or Paleolithic arc of work is 14-hour weeks, is one of the proposed projections of most indigenous cultures to get your basic needs met. 14 hours a week. And now we're working 15-hour days. And so these are artificial times that require very artificial means. We need to carve out active meditation and recovery, and that's protocol if we're going to survive or even thrive in these strange times that we're in right now.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this, for me, when I have people come into the office and this feels completely foreign to them, we start really simple. I say, make it so simple that you can't not do it, even if it's just 5 minutes a day. First thing is I really try to get people to keep their cell phones out of their bedrooms. I think when you wake up and immediately jump on, that just takes away any potential of you really grounding before you go into your day. But the place that I really start people is when you wake up in the morning, I want you to just lay there for a moment and check in with the sensations that are happening in your body, because sometimes people are so disassociated, they can't get to the emotional piece yet. You know, do you have a knot in your stomach? Do you feel like your chest is really heavy? Do you have a headache, just basic body awareness that we lose as we kind of steamroll through our day. And then once you can get that down, ask yourself, how are you feeling? Are you depressed? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel concerned? And if so, you kind of track that back. Well, why is that? Did I not eat yesterday? Did I not get enough sleep? Is there a conversation? Is there something I'm worried about? And we're so used to not doing the basics to even just get a baseline on how our bodies are feeling that we can't get the bigger information after that because we don't have the foundation in place. And so if you can just start with that simple exercise to start getting a little bit of a relationship to your body again, that's a start. And then we kind of stack from there as people go forward in the office.
So your base is in, look at the gauges.
Yeah.
Look at the gauges, guys.
Yeah.
Just look at them. They're working.
Yeah. Another big one that's really been helpful for me is the evening ritual. I was pretty good in the mornings. My evening rituals were, I would work way too late.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a wind down. And then I'd work so hard that I would be like, I need to relax. And so I'd be in front of the TV or doing something to do nothing for a while. But then those evening routines would go late and then I'd run these routines. So for me, the evening protocol has been the most helpful. The morning I had down, but like stopping at a certain time, like now it's even 9 o'clock. Like now that I'm in this, recovery, 9 o'clock, I start winding down for bed. And that's when everything's like, I'm doing evening routines and rituals and breath work and shower, like all the things to just really calm my body. I even changed the lights. That's a really helpful one for me is I change the lights to signal to my body the day's done. And
do you have red lights in the house?
I have a bunch of different colors. I could do any color. It's I could change it. So I just kind of see what feels good. Sometimes it's different colors.
Yeah. Red lights really good for the nervous system. Really.
Red specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Even on the phones. I don't know if you know, there's a function where you can change the color on the phone at night. It's like a triple tap on the phone that changes that blue light to red, which takes the brain activity down a little bit. But speaking to that too, if you have a bunch of, several kids and you have a family and you know that you can't carve that time out in the morning because you're hitting the ground running, then you do a night routine. Or if you have some space, then you do a middle of the day routine. It just has to be a few minutes to start. And once your body starts to recognize that you're paying attention to it, that's when you can kind of stack additional skills on top of it.
So valuable. So, hey, if you're listening to this and any of these things, either check out Sarah, we'll give you her contact information so you can check in with her, or really pay attention to this because this is what's changed the game. I know for me dramatically, and it's so strong for both Philip and I that we're building it in, even from the language, like active recovery is a language that warriors are like, I could do some active recovery, right? Does it feel like rest recovery is like, I don't need that, but active recovery. And I will also say, if you look at a lot of the top athletes and you look at where they spend their money, like there's a lot of money spent on recovery. And so how much are they doing ice baths? How much are they, getting therapy, massage therapy? They're doing so much recovery in order to be an elite athlete. We really have to take that same mindset. If we're going to drive hard, you need to place a lot of emphasis on your self-care and your resiliency practices so that you stay for the long marathon. Super important.
I agree completely.
Hey, I also wanted you do a lot of things, Sarah, like you do a lot of things. You have a lot of range. And I really like what you've been doing lately in your clinics where you've been doing assisted therapy. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about the therapy you're doing and where it originated from and some of the results you're getting with clients. Cause I know this is a whole new movement happening and you're on the cutting edge of that. So I think it'd be interesting for people to learn about.
We're talking about ketamine, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I have a practice in California. I have a private practice and then I have a clinic with several colleagues, and the clinic is integrated. We do everything from Eastern, Western, naturopathic, everything in between. And we've recently, within the last year, bought ketamine into the clinic. And so while I am not the person who's running the program, our MD and our cardiologist runs the program, I'm responsible for all of the integration in the program. And so ketamine therapy, I know a lot of people, when they think of ketamine, have flashbacks to college and potentially strange circumstances where that's made its way into your life at some point. But ketamine is the only psychedelic drug that's legal in the United States right now, I believe in all 50 states across the board. And so they've been doing extensive research on ketamine for about 40 years. And they're finding specifically with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, they're getting astronomical results. And so we sat down, we really combed through the research and just tried to figure out if it's something that we wanted to integrate in. And I personally, in the last year, feel to my core that this is going to change people's lives. And so The way that ketamine works, different from how a lot of the other SSRIs and things of that nature, is that, first of all, it's not meant to be taken every single day, although I am hearing of some practitioners that are prescribing very low doses, but it actually changes your brain chemistry for the better. So when you come into the clinic, it's usually a 4 to 6 week program, depending on how significant your symptoms are. You do an intake with us beforehand, so we're really clear on where your big triggers are, where the big traumas potentially are. And when you come in, we just make it a really peaceful experience. You'll be in a room, in a bed with noise canceling headphones, with curated music, and you take a lozenge, and then we give you an intramuscular injection. And then you have these 2 to 3 hours where your body goes through a bit of a rewiring process, if you will. And so what that basically means is everything we do in this world happens through neuroconnection, through these little patterns that are created in the brain. And the more that we repeat patterns, the stronger those connections are. The reason you reach for your cell phone 100 times a day isn't because you need it. It's because you've done it so many times. There is now a pattern in the brain just saying, pick that up, pick that up. And so it's the same thing with trauma and anxiety and triggers. There are these really deep pathways in the brain that focus around the part of the brain that are purely fight or flight based. And when we look at the neurochemistry, and again, my practice is in Eastern and functional medicine, but I have just studied everything because I'm just fascinated by the way that bodies and minds and spirits kind of evolve in this world. But they found that often people with trauma or people who live in a higher adrenaline state have a fight or flight response that often doesn't turn off. They found that part of the brain, the amygdala, can actually be bigger than it's supposed to be. And the connectivity to the front of the brain, your prefrontal cortex, which is all about grounding and logic and empathy, actually can be degraded up to 50% by some people. So you have this smoke alarm that's constantly going off, even when there isn't a fire. And you have a fire department that can't come put it out because they're not being notified that anything is wrong. So you just have these big feelings where you're moving through the world. And so ketamine focuses on just a little bit of science, the glutamate receptors in the brain. Glutamate is the biggest neurotransmitter that helps all of those little patterns weave themselves. And so what it does while you're in treatment is it slows everything down. It kind of disconnects some of those wiry synapses and actually gives your brain just a minute to toggle offline. So it's a disassociative. You'll have a little bit of a visual sensation, but it's also a sedative. So you feel really relaxed and really, calm. And then when you come back to, usually for the next few hours, you just feel really peaceful. I've done the program. Everyone in my clinic has done the program as well. And so then my job the day after your treatments is to come in on a Zoom call just like this and to start give you some tools. And so we don't like to look at the program as these 4 individual weeks where you're just becoming kind of dependent on this new method. The goal is to really give you these tools to access your somatic body, to learn to ground your nervous system. And so you're doing these exercises throughout the month of the program. So you now have these very strong tools when you're done to consistently reactivate those parts of the brain that really keep you grounded. That part has been really important for us, and it kind of worked beautifully when we decided to bring it in. They do integration in a lot of other clinics, but a lot of it is around journaling and how was your experience? And it was really important to me. And it has been in my clinic, even outside of the ketamine program, that ultimately I want people to feel like they don't need me. I want to give people all of the tools that they need so that they become their own resource first and foremost. And then I'm a touch point at some point. Once we have you in a place that you feel really strong and really grounded, then I'm just an access if you need a boost or if you need a suggestion or a little more information. And so that's the bulk of the program. There's so much I could talk about it. I love it so much. But do you have any specific questions I can give you some kind of guidelines to or away from?
This is great. I just wanted to bring awareness to this because I think it's important and people are looking for tools. And I know you're on the cutting edge of it. And what I love is, because we've talked a lot about this, hey guys, guess what the tool sets are? Resiliency tool sets. Like the same things we talk about, from regulation, purification, reintegration. I mean, and I know you got a bunch of different tools in there as well, but that's really what the umbrella is. It's how to really turn on your parasympathetic nervous system, get out of that fight or flight. It's really accessing your vagus nerve, right? Which is, there's so many strategies and there's so much research around it. So I know we've talked a lot about it, so that we talk about it quite a bit on that's what this, it's all science-based. Again, we're not making up things or doing things. These things work, but it's going to require habits, rituals, in order to make this part of your day. And when you do it regularly, you start to get into this part of your brain, life changes. I think this is why it slows down, because I think this part of the brain is where it's like fight or flight. Everything's quick and it's in survival. I think when you start to get here, you can like things slow down because you see more options. You're like, oh, I'm regulated. I can see a lot more going on. I'm actually present. And so I can move quickly. So it's just a different way of living.
Well, and there's also a piece with the ketamine program where we do offer therapy assisted treatments as well. And when you take the brain offline temporarily, they're finding, especially with really serious PTSD, that because the brain and the amygdala and that fight or flight response isn't as active, you can start to talk about these very deep wounds without the body getting away from you. And to me, that is an extraordinary tool that I really think is going to change the way that so many people move through the world. So there's a lot of ways to activate it. They found with a lot of depression that it's actually some degradation, some kind of withering away of the neural connections. So, and that could be stress, lifestyle, one of 100 different things, medication use over time, poor diet. And they're finding that within minutes of ketamine infusions, some of those synapses start to regrow. And so I've seen patients with depression very next day feel a significant shift in how their emotions are. I've never seen anything work so quickly in the clinic. So again, yes, it's a beautiful tool, but know that if it's something that you're curious about, I would really, really recommend that you're ready to do some work as well, because we're not doing magic pills here. So you.
I just want to give a frame for the people who are thinking this is really way out there, in the same way that maybe
I thought it was way out there before we brought it in until I did it.
The well-researched paleoanthropological evidence of one of the reasons why we have been going into these deep caves in the darkness is that there's a DMT release that when you spend a certain amount of time in darkness, along with the other behaviors, there is a natural DMT release, which is part of our heritage. We have been playing with the healing properties of psychotropics for as long as we have evidence of human culture. So for at least 35,000 years, when we had our cognitive revolution, we can see through all the cave art, through all of the petroglyphs, irrefutable evidence of psychotropic use that has been implemented with humans doing hard things. Those things down in the caves, that's trauma release. Those are hunts.
Yeah.
That's war. Those are things that are being processed, and that's our heritage. So, if you think this is some weird woo-woo, out there artificial stuff, this is a reclamation of our heritage.
Yeah. And I have been a big supporter of psychedelics for many, many years. Ketamine, I had a hesitancy with because of my own feeling around it being man-made and laboratory made, until I started to see some shifts in my own life around things that I didn't even realize were still in there, things that would come up in sessions that just completely blew my mind and took me to a place of such reverence that I really, like I said, I really believe that this is going to be another tool that, if you choose to use it, has the potential to really change lives.
And one of the reasons I wanted you to talk about it, Sarah, is because I'm a big advocate. Like, hey, I know a lot of people use it medicinally or, in their personal use. I'm not an advocate of that at all. Yeah. Personally, I think if you're in a clinic,
recreationally,
recreationally, better way to phrase that. So that's not my MO, but I don't recommend that. So if you're wanting to, if this is curious to you, look for somebody like Sarah or somebody like Sarah that's a clinic that's actively working with you, that you're supervised, that the dosage is controlled, that everything that's being done is used from a science base to get a result, and it's actually regulated. You're checked in. You're cared for. It's not just a recreational thing that people are playing with. It's something done in a very intentional way to get a very specific result.
Get you a good shaman.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, and there's also a difference between doing it recreationally and doing it clinically, in the sense that dose has everything to do with what's in your brain. When you do things recreationally, it can last for very short increments, and that doesn't change the brain chemistry. The reason that everything is dosed by weight in clinic, and the way that you take it in lozenge and also intramuscular, will keep it in your system for several hours. And that's what allows the brain chemistry to change. These quick doses, these quick party usage doesn't allow your body to do that. Environment is everything in ceremony. Taking something and walking around changes it. We set up environment before, during, and after treatments, because it's very important what you do when you walk out of the door and in your following days. So there's a lot of care and intention put into how we administer this in the clinic.
Ceremony is a good word.
I love ceremony.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Nice.
So fun. And so, Sarah, I know we've covered a lot today. If somebody's listening and they're going, man, I may be in adrenal fatigue, I may be heading towards burnout, like really interested, or also interested in the ketamine assisted therapy or any of the things that you have going, how would they find more about what you're doing, your practices, different things that you're working on?
Yeah, there's my website that you can go to, which is MerakiWellnessCA.com. I think we can put that somewhere on a screen. Can we do that?
We can add that in the show notes. Yep.
Great. You can contact me by phone. You can find me on social media. We'll add all of that in, but I'm pretty accessible and always happy to jump on a call if you just want to chat for a few minutes to see if what we do in clinic is something that would benefit you. My purpose is to really help and support as many people that I can. And so I'm here and always open, whether you end up working with us or not. So.
Hey, and I'll also add in, just because I know Sarah really well, and not only does she work with men, I think this is how I was really, really called to work with Sarah. But in addition, I know she also focuses on fertility, and that's one of her sweet spots. So she does a lot of work with women around both hormones, fertility, like a lot of different areas. So you want to speak to that 1 minute too, just in case there's a lot of women listening that would.
I mean, I have a full functioning medical practice. And so basically between Eastern and functional, we treat very much the way that you would see a normal medical treatment to come in and visit your doctor, except we're going to talk a lot more about your lifestyle and your skills and how you can kind of be also a hand in your own healing. Colds and flus, fertility, mental health, digestive issues. I tend to do a lot of tipping point medicine. So people that don't feel well and their doctors say you feel, or your labs look great. I am the one who goes in and investigates and kind of figures out exactly what it is that's keeping you from feeling how you should feel. And then we do a lot of rebuilding bodies in the clinic, basically kind of cleaning it all out and building it all back up.
So helpful. I just so grateful for the work you do in the world. Thank you for who you are. I'm just so grateful to have you as an ally and as a close friend in my life, and such a valuable call. I think a lot of people listening are going to get like, oh, this is why this stuff's a necessity, because warrior culture, we just drive hard. And I think this is a really important conversation if we want to live deep, fulfilling lives, if we want to live deep, fulfilling careers, if we want to be present with our families and actually teach our children how to live for the marathon instead of just living for burnout. So thank you so much for joining us today, coming on, sharing your wisdom.
So good to see you.
You guys are good ones. Thank you.
Okay. See you guys soon.
Hey, real quick, before we get off, we always give a challenge. What would be a good challenge to give the listeners, anybody listening?
A challenge. Well, I think going back to what we said, the challenge is to really carve out some time for yourself every day, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. And that time does not involve your cell phone. It does not involve you listening to a podcast. It is you just sitting with yourself to start to see how you feel. If you take a walk, don't bring your phone with you. Just breathe in the air and kind of pick up on what's going on in the environment around you. Start really making a connection to your body. And then that will guide you into the next steps always.
All right, everybody, do the challenge this week. Take a moment, take 5-10 minutes during your day, check in with your gauges, and thank you for listening, and make sure to stay battle tested.